I pulled up to my parents' house on Thanksgiving Day, heart racing, hands clutching the homemade pumpkin pie like a lifeline. But something was wrong, Dot. The driveway stretched out, empty. No cars, no voices, no welcome. The house stood dark and hollow, its windows staring back at me like empty eyes. My stomach twisted. Thanksgiving was never quiet. It was supposed to be laughter, clinking dishes, the rich scent of turkey in the air. It was supposed to be home, but they were gone. Not waiting, not expecting me. A crushing weight settled in my chest. I wasn't late. I wasn't wanted. I was alone. Totally, devastatingly alone. I walked up the path, my breath turning to fog in the cold November air. I expected the door to fly open. Maybe my dad would appear, arms wide, yelling, "You're finally here!" But nothing happened. I rang the bell, twice, and got no response. I peered in through the front window. The living room was dark, no sign of life. My heart sank with every second of silence. "Maybe they're out back," I whispered, trying to comfort myself. With shaky hands, I edged around the house, only to find empty patio chairs and an unused bonfire pit. It was so quiet I could hear leaves skittering across the driveway. That's when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mom. "We thought you'd be late again. Everyone's already headed to Aunt Carol's. I'm sure they'll save you some leftovers. Don't forget the extra cash we talked about. Love you." Extra cash? My stomach twisted. Mom had been hinting for a while that I should cover more of their bills. But today of all days? The text ended with a cutesy, "love you," but it felt hollow. A few seconds later, my sister Sarah texted, "Haha, sorry bro, we left earlier. Try to catch up. Mom's counting on that support dollar you promised. LOL. Support? Another code word for give us more money. My hand trembled with anger. They had left me deliberately on Thanksgiving. I felt like a spare part, not even a real family member, just the wallet they could tap into whenever they wanted. I'm adopted. My parents never let me forget it, constantly reminding me how I owe them for saving me. Over time, I realized they used guilt to make me pay bills, even my sister Sarah's rent. But on that Thanksgiving afternoon, it all felt worse than ever. They'd locked up and left before I even arrived. I'd heard rumors of other adoptees they'd taken in who mysteriously disappeared once they challenged the financial demands. One day, I found an old photo album with unfamiliar faces labeled "Our Child." It dawned on me that my parents had a pattern: adopt, provide basic care, then lean hard for money. If you resisted, you were cut off. It started with small requests, covering groceries or the electric bill, then escalated as soon as I got a better job. Car payments, my sister's expenses, you name it. Whenever I hesitated, Dad's voice turned harsh and Mom's tears flowed. Their go-to line? "You owe us because we adopted you." I once tried standing up for myself, but they threatened to label me ungrateful and ruin every family holiday. Eventually, I caved. By Thanksgiving, it was obvious I was only invited to Aunt Carol's if I brought money. I couldn't stay in that empty driveway any longer. Fighting tears, I tossed the pumpkin pie into the passenger seat, turned on the engine, and just drove. No plan, no destination. Anger and hurt swirled inside me, yet I also felt a strange relief like I'd reached the end of my rope. At a lonely gas station, I sipped terrible coffee while my phone buzzed nonstop. Scrolling through old photos, I saw my parents' forced smiles, my sister's guarded looks. The truth hit me. Their love was tied to what I could give them. I was about to start my car again when a text came in from an unknown number. Normally I would ignore it, but curiosity won. "Hey, it's Maria Rodriguez from down your parents' street. Community Thanksgiving dinner at the church hall. Are you okay? Your mom said you'd be coming with that homemade pie. Haven't seen you. Let me know if you need directions." Wait, what? My parents had apparently RSVP'd me for a big community meal? They never mentioned it to me. They obviously had no intention of going themselves. Why had they told the neighbors something else entirely? I texted Maria back, explaining I was running late and that my parents were off at Aunt Carol's, but Maria insisted I come anyway, said there was always room. She even mentioned how sorry she was that I seemed upset. She said she saw me drive past, looking distressed. I had a choice: sit in my car, feeling sorry for myself, or try to salvage something good out of Thanksgiving. My family clearly didn't want me, at least not in any genuine way. So maybe it was time to find my own community. I turned the ignition, typed the church hall address into my GPS, and drove off, not sure if I was running towards something or away from something else. I arrived at the church hall with the same pumpkin pie, now slightly crushed on one side, but still edible. The building glowed with warmth. I stepped inside, and the smell of roasted turkey, mashed potatoes, and pies washed over me like a hug. People sat at long tables, chatting, laughing, looking genuinely happy to be together. Maria spotted me and rushed over, opening her arms wide. "You made it," she said, her eyes gleaming with kindness. Suddenly, tears welled up in my eyes. I realized how starved I was for a normal, caring environment. She pulled me over to the food table. "We've got turkey, ham, stuffing, take whatever you like." Another volunteer approached, beaming. "Don't be shy, honey. We've saved a seat for you." I looked around, heart pounding in my chest. This was the warmth I had never truly felt at my parents' house. No hidden motives, no guilt trips, just genuine hospitality. I felt a strange blend of relief and heartbreak. After I grabbed a plate and found a spot, Maria introduced me to a few other people. As we sat down to eat, my phone buzzed again. This time the screen lit up with Mom's number. I hit ignore. A minute later she texted, demanding that I hurry to Aunt Carol's with the money. "We're waiting," it read. "You wouldn't want us to have to tell everyone the truth about where you came from, would you?" That last line made me freeze. They'd threatened me many times, but seeing it in writing on Thanksgiving was the final nail in the coffin. They wanted me to live in fear, to believe that being adopted was some huge shame. But at that very moment, I glanced around the table of strangers who'd welcomed me with open arms, not because I owed them money, but because it was Thanksgiving. My chest tightened, but in a new way. I felt a surge of defiance. Maybe it was time to speak up, not just for myself, but for the others who had been manipulated. "You know," I said quietly to Maria, "I need to tell you something about my parents." She set down her fork and listened. Slowly, I explained how I was adopted, how my family used it as leverage to make me pay for everything, how they had done the same to others before me. "My parents adopt kids," I whispered, "and then guilt them for money once they're grown. They did it to at least 2 others that I know of, and both disappeared after they refused to pay." Maria's eyes widened in shock. One of the volunteers overheard and leaned in, also stunned. "That's horrible," she said softly. "I had no idea." Word spread fast. A small group began to gather around me as I told the full story, from the first time my parents asked for grocery money to the moment they left me in an empty driveway on Thanksgiving. Some people looked outraged, some teared up. Then Maria placed a hand on my shoulder. "You're safe here," she said, her voice steady. "You don't owe them anything just because they adopted you. Adoption is an act of love, not a loan." It felt like a tidal wave of relief. I hadn't realized how desperately I needed to hear those words. For years, I'd convinced myself I owed them for giving me a home, but hearing Maria say it so plainly lit a spark in me. Halfway through dinner, my phone buzzed again. This time, Dad was calling. I let it ring once, twice, until Maria's gentle nudge made me consider picking up. "Speak your truth," she whispered. I took a deep breath and answered. Immediately, Dad's voice thundered through the line, accusing me of disrespect, telling me I was ungrateful, reminding me, as always, that I wouldn't even be alive if they hadn't saved me. He demanded I show up now with the money, or else. "Or else what?" I finally replied, heart pounding. "You'll disown me? You'll tell everyone I'm adopted? Go ahead, tell them. I'm not ashamed." Silence. Then the phone call cut off. A lump formed in my throat. I half expected a swarm of texts, but none came. The rest of dinner passed in a strange haze of comfort and clarity. I ate turkey and stuffing, listened to kind people share their stories, and realized how different real belonging felt from forced obligation. That night, as I prepared to head home, I thought about one last confrontation. Should I drive to Aunt Carol's? A part of me was afraid, but another part needed closure. So I mustered my courage, said my goodbyes at the church hall, and drove into the night. Aunt Carol's house was lit up with holiday lights. Cars lined the street, my parents, my sisters, a few cousins. My heart thumped as I walked up the driveway. Inside, the chatter died the moment I stepped through the door. Mom stood in the hallway, arms crossed. Dad hovered behind her, face like thunder. Sarah pretended not to see me, busy texting on her phone. "Well, look who finally showed up," Mom said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Where's the money you promised?" I gritted my teeth. "That's all you have to say to me? No sorry for ditching me? No concern that I spent Thanksgiving alone? You just want my wallet?" Dad scowled. "We raised you. We gave you a roof over your head. We saved you from who knows what situation. The least you can do is repay us. You're so ungrateful." My chest felt tight, but I stood firm. "I never asked to be saved," I said quietly. "I was a child who needed a family, and you used me. You've done it before with other adoptees. You lure them in, claim you're giving them a loving home, then you hold it over their heads for the rest of their lives. That's blackmail, not love." Mom's face turned red. Dad's eyes flashed with anger. Sarah put down her phone and stared at the floor. The silence was suffocating. I thought Dad might hit me, but he just clenched his fists. "Get out," he finally spat. I swallowed the knot in my throat. "Gladly," I whispered, "but I'm done being your paycheck, and just so you know, I've told people. The community knows. If you try this again with another kid, they'll be ready for you." I walked out, half expecting someone to chase after me, but no one did. Outside, the cold air hit my lungs, making me shiver, but it felt strangely clean, like breathing fresh oxygen after years in a cramped room. I drove away, tears streaming down my cheeks, but they weren't all sad tears. Some were tears of relief that I was free. That night I found myself back in the church parking lot. The lights were off and the hall was quiet now, but I just sat there remembering the warmth and acceptance I'd felt just hours before. It struck me then. Family doesn't have to be the people who raised you. Family can be the people who truly care about you, who don't hold you hostage with guilt. I had learned that lesson the hardest way possible. In the days that followed, I kept expecting my parents to reach out, maybe to apologize, or to deliver one more threat. Neither happened. I told a few close friends about everything and they supported me, reminding me I wasn't at fault. Maria and some other folks from the community dinner stayed in touch, inviting me to small gatherings, texting to check in. I told them about the old photos, the mysterious adoptees who disappeared, the financial blackmail. Several people were horrified, promising they'd keep an eye on my parents so no other child ended up in the same trap. I felt lighter, freed. Of course, I still wrestled with pain, wondering why they had singled me out as their piggy bank. But part of me was done asking why. I realized it wasn't my job to fix their broken sense of love. About a week later, the church invited me to a volunteer event. We packed meals for families in need and delivered them around town. It felt good to help people without strings attached, to give freely and see genuine smiles rather than suspicious stares. One of the older volunteers tapped me on the shoulder. "I heard about your situation," he said. "Just remember, real families don't charge interest on love." Then he handed me a to-go container filled with turkey leftovers. "We had extra from the dinner," he said with a wink. "Figured you deserved a second round." I laughed, a real laugh from deep in my chest. For the first time in my life, I felt accepted just for being me, not for what I could pay. I began searching for the other adoptees my parents had kicked out. Through social media and old documents, I managed to connect with one, a guy named Travis. He was in his 30s, older than me by a decade. He confirmed everything. Our parents used to brag about rescuing kids, but once they reached adulthood, they demanded money. If Travis couldn't provide it, they turned vicious. He left and never looked back. We had a long phone call, bonding over the manipulations and guilt trips. He too had found a healthier life after cutting ties. Hearing his story made me feel less alone. It also fueled me to speak up more, so maybe no future child would go through that same cycle. Chapter 15. The Real Home. Over time, my hurt and anger began to heal. I no longer flinched every time the phone rang. My mind felt clearer, my heart less burdened. I spent more time with people who actually cared about me. Friends, neighbors, co-workers, the folks from the church. I found a small apartment in a cozy neighborhood, a place I could finally call my own. No demands, no guilt. On the walls, I hung photos, not of my adoptive parents, but of my new family, the friends who chose me, and the volunteers who welcomed me on Thanksgiving. I even put up a picture of Travis, a brother I never knew I had until recently. Still, Thanksgiving remains a bittersweet memory. I think back to that empty driveway, that text from Mom. In a strange way, I'm grateful it happened. It forced me to confront the toxic situation I had been ignoring for years. It set me free. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe, hit that like button, and comment below with your city or share your own experiences. Let's remind each other that real family is about love and respect, not blackmail and guilt.